Glenn, here in the commentary box at the Modus Super Series. Just tell us how it's been for you since you joined us.
I mean, genuinely, I'm absolutely loving it. And part of me thinks that people don't believe me, that all of a sudden it's the end of the world, that I don't have a Pro Tour card no more. Genuinely, I'm just beginning to settle in Portsmouth. Don't get me wrong, day one when I arrived, I was thinking, what have I done? It's a long way from home. Even as a dart player, I didn't really enjoy being away. But once I sort of settled in, started getting a bit of a routine, genuinely loving it. And I'm using my brain again. 30 years working in office, I was always looking, if my dart career ended, what's my transferable skills? Commentary was right high up on the agenda. All of a sudden you think, have you got the right voice for it? I'm more of a numbers man rather than words, but honestly, so far, so good.
Well, look, let's come on to more of the darts commentary later, but let's first talk about how you've ended up here. So there's been a lot of sort of attention on you losing your professional status in the PDC because of how quick the rise was and then how quick the decline was, really. So let me just go back to, a few years ago when you were a county player. Did you ever envisage going on to achieve the great things that you did achieve in the game?
And there's so many answers to that question, because at that county stage, I knew I was a good player. And it took someone like Jamie Caven to come to a local competition to say, Glenn, you just don't leave Middlesbrough, which was true. It was a case of bring anybody and I'll beat them. And I just wouldn't spread the wings. And, by then I'm late 30s, so you're thinking your best is past. And I decided to start travelling age 41. And I guess, the beginning of the question, it sort of ended when I was 51. It feels, I'm hoping it's to be continued. So it was just a decade of just up and up and up. And I had a wonderful time and no regrets.
Just explain that feeling along the way, because not many people in any walk of life, every single year is almost better than the year before. Remarkable.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that you speak to me now, because we've had Martin Wolfie Adams here this week, and he was a guy I sort of looked at. I was watching how he practiced, how he prepared, what time he got to venues, even to the stage of what flights they were getting. And I just wanted to copy that, replicate that. So when I did come back 12 months later, I sort of knew the system. And in 2012, I won the Northern Ireland Open, and it's on YouTube. And to the left of me, I was playing Martin Phillips, one of the big legends, and to the left, I had my Northern Ireland family, my brothers, sort of living over there, and it was just a fantastic memory. Round about the same time, I was getting picked for England, probably playing the best darts of my life at the time there. The game was just so ridiculously easy then. And it was just one step after the next. As you said, it was just a creeping up them ladders till winning the World Masters, beating Larry Butler, was pretty special. I think that was 2015. I think one thing about the commentary, you realise I'm not brilliant with dates and my memory of who I've played and when, but that was a special moment in Hull, beating Larry Butler. And then it was just like 5 years of just incredible highs, unbelievable highs. And I still think the very best of them all was beating Danny Nopper in that first Lakeside. I think I dreamt of that moment a million times, and not once in that million times did I fall to my knees. It was just so natural. And, if you could just have a penny for your thoughts for them, 4 to 5 seconds, if you can bottle that adrenaline, that feeling, that adulation, how proud to see your family, it was very, very special. The Premier League was great, but it was all about the bunts at that time.
Yeah.
There was no crowd there, no camera work, so it didn't feel the same. And right at that point, I was just on top of the world.
Well, look, you won those 3 Lakeside titles consecutively. At that point, you were really like the Phil Taylor of the BDO, if you like. What was it like to be walking into any tournament in the system you were playing in and being the man to beat?
I loved it. I genuinely loved it. I used to walk in, Chris, and go, who am I playing in the final today? 1,000 people? 4,000 people at the Dutch Open? And my mentality was, looking around the room, who am I going to play in the final today? Mm-hmm. If only I could just get that Glen Durrant back, during the bad times, which no doubt we'll come on to in a second there. But what happened to that guy inside of me was the fights I was having with myself, where I was just supremely confident, totally at ease with my ability, and just wanted more and more success. It was a great feeling being the number 1 seed and the best player.
And you made the decision eventually to make the sort of cross to the PDC. And that Glen Durrant did come, didn't he, pretty quickly as well? The rise just continued.
Yeah, and the story in that one is an exhibition in Leeds with Paul Wilson, I think. There is a name for that one as well. The Dazzler. And I was playing, won my opening game, and it was our works night's party. And I remember walking, doing the walk, and I could see they were absolutely legless. And I was like sort of saying, oh, listen, just calm down, because it's like, this is a different crowd. Don't be shouting when Phil's playing. And they were drinking champagne, etc. And my very big boss said, Glenn, I was legless, could barely see you. And she said, I sobered up in seconds because I stood there and I had 119 average against Phil, beat him 4-0, who wasn't happy because the night was all about him. The crowd wasn't happy, but I was just smashing everybody then. And she said, Glenn, I just looked and went, he's at work tomorrow. So then she got me in on the Monday and said, look, I'm going to give you a 2-year sabbatical. Your job will be here in 2 years' time. So in February the 2nd, 2019, I left exactly 32 years to the day, February the 2nd, that I started my first job there. So I thought that was interesting that it was on that day there. And within a fortnight, I rang Works and said, I'm a professional dart player now until the plan was 55. So, so I handed in my notice within 2 weeks of being a PDC player.
And then, of course, you had the success. You won a title pretty early in the PDC and went on to get that Premier League crown, which you talked about. But the sort of strange part of your story is that if I ask you when the decline started, you would say it happened during that Premier League campaign, right?
Yeah, I was fantastic. And honestly, I always say that part of me coaching that I'm doing, for 1 week in my life, I played Daryl Gurney at Liverpool in the Premier League, and I got a message off a very influential player. And he said, you are the best player in the world right now. And I used to look back in the dark times at that message. So in April 2020, I went to bed thinking I am currently the best player in the world. Went through lockdown and worked hard. I remember around about the June, July, in a boiling hot in my bedroom, we played Nathan Aspinall, Michael Smith, Chris Dobie, and I remember playing Andy Bolton in the final, who was just relentless in lockdown. I've tried to sort of speak about that in some of my commentary that I've done on Andy Bolton. And so I knew around about the July. And then I had loads of frame shirts completed, and I went round all Teesside. They were snapped up, and the last one I went to, he started querying the way I was throwing a dart and recommended I threw with a kite. That's the moment when I started thinking. I never ever thought about throwing a dart before. If you'd have said after Danny Noppert, how do you stand? How do you throw? All this talk I do when I'm on commentary that I'm trying to get across, being analytic about people's throws. I just threw the dart. All I saw was my handprint of looking at the treble 20. And that's when it all started to go wrong. So around about the August 2020, I'm not sure the exact date when I won the Premier League, but there was about 6 to 8 weeks where all of a sudden I started thinking about my throw, how I wanted to stand, especially that forward press and then bringing it. And as you can see now, I'm not even able to bring my dart back now. And that's all because I started overthinking. And that night I won the Premier League, when I look at that throw, it was a shadow of its former self.
So that night you win the Premier League, you are the premier player in World Darts, you've won the tournament that includes the elite players in the world, yet the throws started to break down, mentally you've started to think differently about darts, and then suddenly over the next, 18 months or so, you start not being able to win matches. What was that feeling like, particularly for someone who was so used to this rapid incline?
At the night I won the Premier League, I must be the only player in Premier League history who was concerned. I was thinking, what is happening to me? I then went to a Euro 2 within 6 hours of winning the Premier League, and that's when my darts were sitting really flat. I remember scraping through a German qualifier, and I beat him, and then went on to play someone and got beat. But there was all this, Glenn is Premier League champion. Deep down, I knew there was something fundamentally wrong. And then I went to Riesa and got a message in a German airport. I could see Mac Elkin go white as a sheet and went, Glenn, you failed a COVID test. I did this stupid thing on social media saying, I think I've got a cold. Me being on social media, I had a little bottle of Cavonia or something like that, because education of COVID at that point wasn't really great. And he's me saying, I don't feel very well. Never once thought I had COVID. And the worst thing about it was I got the COVID in a German airport. I mean, I was contacted by the consulate. Matt Porter was constantly on the phone to me. It was an absolute disaster. And I got home a couple of days later, and then all of a sudden, COVID had hit me hard, and I lost a couple of stone. I felt weak. I felt terrible. Never ever recovered after that. And then somehow had a dart to beat Dirk van Duijvenbode at the at the Worlds to be in the quarterfinals. I think I beat Danny Baggish, and me throws like this. It's, I'm just absolutely scrapping. And the commentators are saying only Glen Durrant could get through these games because I'm that grinder. I'm that player who finds a way to win. I'm getting there. I went home, I was nearly depressed. Gets call, I'm in the Premier League because I've won it again, and that's when it spiraled totally out of control. And then games behind closed doors at the Premier League at the Milton Keynes hotel are just... Well, I cried. I'm not embarrassed to say there was nights I went to bed and I was like, what's happening to me?
So, you've gone from going into a room thinking, who am I playing in the final, as you said before, to now going into a room thinking, I'm going to get beat first round.
I remember, and I hope he doesn't watch this, but everybody in the year wanted to play Dawson Michelle one year. He was having a terrible time, and he was the kind of person you looked and like, who's got Dawson? I hope it's me today. And all of a sudden, I'm Dawson Michelle. I remember I think it was Chris Dobie. It was just a joke but it resonated so bad with me. He's like, Glenn, everybody wants to play you first round. And that was the moment. Then I was like, by then, confidence was on the floor. I was getting slammed 6-0 every week. Walked out of a game midway. It was just a horrid, terrible time. And, I did have the highs of the game and the serious lows in the game.
And obviously now we know that you sat in the commentary chair, you're doing some coaching as well. At what point during that time did you start to think about what else might I be able to do to prolong my involvement in the game that I love?
I went for a job with a local housing company, out of desperation, got the job. I'm thinking, what am I doing? Surely there's some transferable skills that I had. And then got the chance with Motor Super Series, who were fantastic, to do a little bit of commentary. And then the coaching just exploded. I mean, genuinely exploded. Just went absolutely mental. And I'm getting better as a coach. I went to see Wayne Mardle myself through my problems. And, he's what we aspire to be. His knowledge of coaching is sensational. And I've got my own style, my own thoughts, and, things I try to pass across in the commentary box as well. And I'm having a whale of a time. I don't have a day off now until mid-June. And it's just, the hardest thing now is managing the diary.
3 kind of final questions here. Biggest regret?
I don't think I've got any regrets, but maybe playing in the Premier League 2020. But the lure of 35 grand you get for not winning a leg of darts, approximately, when I played in the Premier League. That was a full year of being a housing manager, screamed, shouted at, spat at on one occasion as a housing manager. I just thought if I just get through these 2 weeks, possibly a regret.
One hope for the future, one big hope for the future.
Well, the big hope is that, what a wonderful story it would be if I can go to Q School in January and get my card back and become competitive again. When I watched some of the darts now, I don't think I could ever reach them heights. I don't think I ever did reach them heights. These younger players are getting better and better. A nice story would be get my card back and be competitive again.
And finally, and most importantly, best co-commentator at the Motor Super Series.
Definitely Henry Deacon. I mean, he's just such a mentor. He's fantastic. But, joking aside, I've worked with some fantastic co-commentators right now. And I'm trying to pinch a little bit of their ideas. I look at you, I look at Dan Dawson, I'm a big fan of Mark Webster. Henry's been absolutely amazing as well. So I'm having an unbelievable time right now.
Well, that wasn't how I foresee that ending, but thanks for your time, Glenn. Thanks for being so honest with us.
Thank you.